All right, so I'm calling the meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes, please.
President Clements,
Here.
Vice President Valentine, here. Trustee Headland, here. Trustee Clements, here. Trustee McNow.
Here.
Great. All right, so I don't believe we have any changes to the agenda, so can we have the resolution for approving the agenda, please?
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the agenda as written.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. So the next meeting of the Haldane Board of Education is a workshop meeting, and it's scheduled for Tuesday, 27th, 2024 at 7 p.m. here in the middle school, high school library. The topic is going to be the elementary school site visit summary and detail report, along with budget presentations regarding special education and a recommended budget proposal.
And with that, we may move the elementary detail report, not the school visit summary, but just considering that the special education, as well as the administration's recommended budget proposal are on that agenda. That seems like it might be a little much to also include the elementary detail report. So I'll work with Ms. Gemin to perhaps push that back to the next meeting.
Do you think she's going to want to change the date that John and I
think
visit schools?
Not the visit.
Okay.
The visit's fine,
Okay.
but her detail summary
All right.
that she provides will move back one meeting.
Okay, I think that works. And that also means then, just to give a little background into what we were talking about, that also means that that will be the week that John and I have the opportunity to visit the elementary school in line with our new practice of having board members visit the schools and meet with students and staff before a building detail report. And I am excited about that one. I am. And the only other thing I have to say is that now that we're talking about the budget, it's also time for folks to be thinking about Board of Trustee, Board of Education elections there. That's how we go. Board of Education elections. There will be 2 positions open this year. So petitions are available in the district office or by contacting Megan Shields, district clerk. The petitions and the first campaign expenditure statement are due no later than 5 p.m. on Monday, April 22nd, 2024. So anybody interested in running for the board, please be in touch with me or one of us. If you have any questions and would like to learn more, we'd be happy to talk to you. And then the other thing related to this is the annual district meeting and trustee election will be held on May 21st, 2024. And again, there's going to be 2 3-year terms commencing on July 1st, 2024 and ending on June 30th, 2027. So it's that time of year. All right, that's really all I have.
Yes. Thank you. Dr. Clements, welcome to the community members that are with us this evening. It's good to see a handful of our teachers here this evening. I'll keep my comments brief just because we have 2 presentations this evening that I'll be a part of. I just wanted to acknowledge Tom Sobol was a superintendent of schools. He was former commissioner of education in New York State. He was actually part of later in his career training teachers who wanted to become school administrators. And he had said, school is an important part of a child's life, but one cannot separate how children live from how they learn. A child's life is shaped by powerful forces, that of his parents, his teachers, the community members with whom he engages. And when those forces conspire together, great things can happen for our kids. And having attended the elementary school musical, Willy Wonka Kids, 2 weeks ago, I cannot help but to feel that those forces, including the spirit and energy of our young performers, coalesced into really profound experience for them, for their families that got to share in that experience with them, the staff who were a part of the program, and the community members who were in attendance. And I wanted to thank Mr. Sauer and the team that he brought together for their efforts in bringing all of us together with our kids, and congratulations to our students on their performance. It was really exceptional.
Great. Sounds like it was fantastic.
It was good energy in the room. With that, if I may, we'll transition to our curriculum and instruction report.
Yes, so moving
Great.
into special presentations.
So
Thank you.
Josh and I are going to share various elements of this. I'll start, and then Josh will share a few things, and then we'll go from there. So we're going to use the podium over here. A little off center. As we enter budget development, I just want to acknowledge that we're using pretty conservative estimates from the governor's executive budget proposal. That's become quite a hot topic in current advocacy efforts, as you're keeping track of your email and getting messages from NYSBA and other local organizations of which the board's a part of. I just reviewed one today from the Lower Hudson Education Coalition, which is worth checking out to get a sense of the advocacy efforts that are now having with the legislature as they continue to work with budget development. I did want to provide just a few notes on the governor's executive proposal. It does provide for an increase in foundation aid for Haldane, but it does utilize a lower inflationary factor than what the current law formula projects. So you will see in some of the advocacy notices that you're reading now, direct advocacy for changing the inflation factor that's incorporated into the formula. So I believe the governor used an inflation factor of somewhere around 2%. In reality, inflation was around somewhere, by formula, somewhere around 4%. So that would, if there was a shift there, that would lead to an increase in foundation aid, further increase to foundation aid for Haldane. One thing I'm also, and we all should be paying close attention to, is that the governor's budget eliminated the Save Harmless provision, which impacts hundreds of districts throughout the state, I think north of 300 districts. The Save Harmless provision established that a school district could not receive less foundation aid from one year to the next. The governor's position has been on this well over time. School districts have lost students. Because of that loss of students, the formula should reflect that, and districts should receive less foundation aid. That Save Harmless provision, though, provided those school districts with a level of stability in their funding that had become quite accustomed to, and obviously can have quite a negative impact. You see some districts are losing upwards of 20 or 30% of their foundation aid. Now, what I'm paying attention to is we didn't, which is a good thing for us. If the Save Harmless provision were to somehow shift, is this one pot of money that's going to be redistributed across all 700 districts in New York State? So, for example, a district that was losing aid now maybe has their aid is stabilized. Does that mean now we receive less aid because we're just drawing from one pot of money, or is more money being put into, if you will, public education in New York State? So that's, I think, some things we have to pay attention to as the weeks play out ahead. And I know I have a meeting set up with WIPSPA with Senator Rollison, I believe on Thursday. There's a couple of other reach out efforts the BOCES is hosting as well to connect with our local legislators as they go into session and continue to work with the One House budget proposal. One other piece that I wanted to note in the executive budget was $10 million is included for professional development and literacy. This is directly tied to ensuring that all of our educators, particularly those at the primary level, are trained on and implementing best practices in reading instruction. I feel like we, and Josh will speak to this, we've already been doing this work. It's nice to see that there's additional funding available for this, but that being said, and our teachers are already engaging the work as across the elementary school. So it's nice to see, but I think more of a signal that we've been doing the right work in this particular area over the course of the last 2 school years. This is a summary of our current aid allocations. As you know, we receive more than just foundation aid. We receive aid across a variety of areas that culminates in our full aid amount there. You'll just note on the bottom our foundation aid increase, which is the most significant level of funding that we receive from the state, has increased about 5.6%.
Just a quick question, sorry, on that. Is BOCES aid partially generated from services that we use that BOCES reimburses?
Correct. So I believe there's a 1-year lag on this, if you will. So services that we engaged in with BOCES last school year, it's aid we're due to receive back on those services. So there's years where we use BOCES more than others. So that's a number that fluctuates from year to year based on what our spending is with BOCES from the previous school year.
Cool, thank you.
Our levy limit, we finalized, I think I had indicated in the previous report that we estimated to be around 2.5%. We feel pretty good about this figure now that our allowable levy limit will be 2.8% this school year. The allowable growth factor that's incorporated into the levy limit is the lesser of CPI or 2%. So it's 2% for the upcoming school year. That's a net increase of $620,000 that we're able to levy from the community. Again, we are a school district that is primarily funded through taxpayer dollars. The majority of our budget is funded by local property taxes. So that would increase from $22.1 million to $22.7 million in next year's budget if we were to go to the levy limit. With that, I'll turn it over to Josh for a few minutes, and then I'll come back on. All right, Josh?
Yep.
Just step back here.
You got it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I alluded to some of these ideas when I gave my presentation on the New York State assessments, but just to kind of go over a few of the major curricular areas that are impacted by the budget for this year that were from last year into this year. The first I'd say would be the curriculum articulation process that's been ongoing since I started here in Haldane, which is I think really a testament to our teacher-driven kind of process. And when we think about the New York State standards and the Haldane Essentials, pretty much every discipline or curricular area has been undergoing some sort of change or revision in New York State over the last 5 years and continue to move forward in some of those. And so many of these opportunities have been aligning and examining current curriculum against upcoming or new standards or new practices. So our teachers have been doing that over the past couple of years, and I'd say a major focus of what we continued with this year has been that process as well. And always looking through curriculum through the idea of implementing and documenting the Haldane Essentials, right? Sticking to the strategic coherence plan and really trying to be purposeful where those opportunities exist. I put down a couple of really big examples like the high school seal of civic readiness and the middle school capstone project, which are very much so related. I would say in terms of a curriculum articulation process, a good amount of time was spent this past summer with the social studies department in aligning its practices to ensure that we were ready to apply for the seal of civic readiness, which we have and been approved for. It's just kind of a placeholder, an example of probably about 6 or 7 teachers coming together over the summertime and looking at their current practices against kind of these regulations and processes and updating the way that we go about some of the things in social studies to ensure that as students are successful in social studies, they're simultaneously and continuously eligible to meet the seal of civic readiness requirements as kind of an example of that. Second down that line is our elementary literacy professional development, which this current year has been really continuing our work with Megan Hargrave, consultant, who's in her second year working with our elementary teachers around best practices in literacy instruction in the elementary school. And then the elementary school has been working on what's known as the Haldane Literacy Profile, which is a repository and set of different assessments and data that is provided to our students in K-5 around taking the NWA results and trying to learn more about them specifically around their literacy development in order to plan and implement instruction that meets their targeted area of growth. World language expansion has been tremendous. So this was something that we upgraded from last year from a 0.4-ish or a 0.6-ish position into a full-time position. And the results have been tremendous. Not only have we been able to really maintain and solidify our French program, which is important to understand, but also the exploratory experience that we've been able to provide our students in grades 3 through 5, getting a mix of kind of language, which really connects back to the literacy piece of it as well. Gets an exposure to language and culture, not only in French and Spanish, but with the teacher that we've hired, sign language as well. So just multiple modes of just kind of what language and culture is. And then as students get into grade 6, it's a little more focus on introductory level to Spanish and French, so they're then able to make a decision after the 6th grade year into 7th and 8th grade. And then obviously it provides, I think, a 0.4, 0.5 in French instruction to continue the French program moving forward. So that has been something that has been great to implement and continue to move forward with as well. In STEM instruction as well, there was earmark monies out of last year's budget, which we've utilized to increase our 3D printer inventory. They were mainly housed in one area or so in one grade level. And through working with Leah Horn, we've worked to expand our 3D printers, which just provides more access for students to print things. It takes a while to print some of these things that are happening. And so the more that we can do over each year to increase this inventory just provides us more flexibility. And embedded with that, we've upgraded the curriculum that we utilize, the modules that we've purchased for really grades 6, 7, and 8. As we just looked at what we were utilizing, we recognized that many of the teachers that are doing these STEM explorations do it as a 0.2 or an addition to kind of their content area. So upgrading and providing modules that they could utilize, that kind of sequence from a 6th grade to a 7th grade to an 8th grade, was something that myself and Leah had looked into with the help of the teachers. And so we've purchased those. It's been a little bit to get them in there, but we've gotten to the process where they've arrived, and now it's about pulling teachers out to take a look at them for their 6 through 8. As we,
Super quick question.
yeah, sure.
Just on that increased 3D printer inventory and STEM instruction. So you've seen increased utilization, or you're expecting increased utilization?
A little bit of both. I think that currently in grades 4 and 5, they have been doing a really good amount of projects, and they've noticed that one thing that has slowed that a little bit is the access to the printers and the availability. So the point would be they'd have to group students in groups of 5 or 6 to print something out. And so not by any means the solution to the problem, but one of them was to see, well, can we just purchase more of them, which allows more opportunities for students to either work in smaller groups to print things or just really increase our capacity to be able to utilize those. So it's a little bit of both. And as we think forward, we do think that having more of an inventory is something that we would aspire to and aligns with our kind of goals that we're thinking of when we think of STEM instruction.
So you'll kind of see
Yes.
that utilization, you believe, in the next year or so.
We believe so, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then on the capstone project, just a simple question.
Yep.
A student in 6 through 8 can complete the capstone project, or only in 8th grade?
Both. So
Okay.
the way I'd say that is in terms of, so a capstone project can be completed at any grade level in really grades 5 through 8, right?
Okay.
So one of the ways that we're looking at it here in the middle school is how we can spiral that process to culminating in really an 8th grade one, right? Ryan McConville's in the audience. He's been working on it.
I wasn't going to ask.
Not going to ask him to come up here.
He hadn't prepped.
The idea,
Put him on the spot.
the aspect I would say so there's that part of it. In terms of accounting for the seal of civic readiness, in terms of the requirements that students have, only 8th graders who complete that project get a credit that is then
Get the
applied
credit.
to the seal of
Okay,
civic readiness.
I got you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to, maybe when Dr. Selke comes, hear a little bit more about the capstone project. 'Cause
Yep.
I'm sure we've talked about it before. I cannot remember anything about it, but I'd love it. And just question on STEM, is there an overall owner of STEM instruction across the district? Like, there's an English department chair.
There is not. There's not an overall individual who's a STEM person other than probably
You.
myself.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
It's just a question of how you link it, because there's a lot in there,
Yes.
and how do you link it together as a cohesive, like, this is what we're offering. I was just wondering how that happens. So,
Yes.
Okay. All right, so you.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
So me.
I don't want to, if I'm wrong, please tell me. But at the high school, there's someone who, I know at high school there is a science chair.
There
and
is.
a math chair.
Correct.
And an English chair. Is the same true at social study? I mean, in middle school?
There is a science
There
chair
is.
and a
Okay,
math chair, yes.
So I think
there are coordinators, yes.
With the way I heard John's question is, it sounds like there's not somebody K-12, and maybe that was your question.
No, it was across all of science, technology,
I
because
see.
they cut across a
That
lot
was
of
your
different.
question.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
I misunderstood.
That's
what the
okay.
question was, yeah. It's an interesting thought, though. Well, I didn't really intend to necessarily stop you, but I actually have a follow-up question about this page, too.
Yeah.
It was,
That's all
but
right.
I don't want to put you on the spot. So the use of the 3D printer, and again, maybe this is questions, maybe we want Dr. Selke to come back, because I know she already did her detailed report, but like, sometimes I think, like, is using the 3D printer the culmination of some sort of like engineering project? Like what, I'm just curious, I'm always a tiny bit skeptical about any kind of educational process that focuses a whole lot on sort of like product and not necessarily process, right? And so, anyway, at some point I'd be interested to know, like, well, what are they printing and how do they get to that printing thing, that whatever they're printing, yeah.
Yes. My understanding, it's the process of getting to the printing. It's not the focus
It's
on
some
the
sort of
printing.
engineering
Some sort of
process.
engineering coding process that is
Okay, that
equating
makes
to
sense.
the
Okay.
printing
Or
aspect.
yeah, some sort
Yes.
of coding, okay.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep. Great. As we think about moving forward, and some of this is what we're utilizing this year, but also thinking into next year as well, as Dr. Benante had referenced earlier, a focus is continuing on the literacy professional development, and this year, in terms of advancing some of that work around the science of reading professional development, right? We have in February, actually coming up, 2 days. That's going to be K-5 and some middle school teachers and high school teachers as well. It's going to go over 2 days of professional development by a consulting group called the Reading League, which is really going to come in here and provide just a common message and a common experience for our teachers around this terminology and what the science of reading is, and a better way for us to then, once having that common definition or experience, to really have those conversations, K-12 really, around these practices and how they're being implemented here in Haldane. I referenced the SUNY New Paltz micro-credential, which is, excuse me, through SUNY New Paltz has offered an extensive 45-hour course that's being offered that I would say at least a dozen of our teachers in the elementary school have signed up for as yet another kind of experience for them to go out and get information around the science of reading. So I think combine those two aspects, which are newest this year, combined with the work still with our literacy consultant, just speaks to gathering information from a variety of different sources around this topic that we'll continue to examine in terms of just our understanding for this year and moving into next year as well. Universal design for learning, K-12, is another aspect that we'll be bringing into Haldane in March, really. And the idea there is this is like a common framework for curriculum design and implementation directly connected to the strategic coherence plan, which is a general education philosophy around designing instruction, which definitely has roots in special education through the special education audit. It was mentioned, obviously, but through ENLs, just through any students really, about their engagement in the education process. And again, ways that our teachers can think about and have similar conversations around how we design instruction with everybody in mind for all learners. So we're having that introductory professional development in March during Superintendent Conference Day. That'll be K-12 as well. So again, another opportunity just for capacity building and understanding at this point, right? And then continuation, I mentioned the curriculum articulation process continues to be ongoing work and is really where you see some of these ideas in 1 and 2 where that happens, right? Last year, every year, next slide will show, we have an increase in the amount of money we spend on curriculum summer hours, which is a tremendous resource to have. We had 338 hours last year that our teachers signed up for, K-12 on a variety of different ways about updating curriculum, which has been a really great process. And then continuation of workshops and conferences. We have a very strong presence through Putnam Northern BOCES. All of our curricular coordinators and department chairs belong to the collegial circles, in which they go and meet other representatives, so they're connected regionally. I would say, I think one of the goals is to think about expanding that for some of our staff members into either some of these either national, state, or more regional type conferences as just another platform to go out and receive more information to bring back to Haldane as we move forward. Oh, that's you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, actually, can I ask one more question?
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah,
So
sorry
I'm,
about
I am so embarrassed.
I thought there was
to
another slide, but I'm good.
No.
Nice try.
So, actually, this is in a conversation I had with Dr. Benante recently. He pointed out the difference, but I don't know the difference between curriculum articulation and what I would call like curriculum development. Do you mind just spending a
I mean, I think
It's-
off the top of my head, I don't see much of a difference other
Not
than
much,
just
okay.
language.
Okay.
I see them interchangeable. When I say articulation, it's the process of
taking the standard?
teachers thinking about, taking all the standards, their local curriculum, and thinking about documenting what happens in their classroom
Okay.
in terms of, we have a unit and design template that we utilize. So when I
Yes.
think of that, I think it's the articulation. I think that's really a record of the collaboration and the work that goes into it. But at some point, that which we've really talked about, there needs to be a document that fosters communication. So going back, we have a local shared drive. We have K-12, which all teachers, when they go through this process, and if they do summer curriculum work, they're collaborating, they're going through the process, they're creating, and then they're uploading into this shared drive aspect that all teachers K-12 have access to. So it's just another way of accessing and having communication with other departments also.
Great, thank
Yeah.
you. Thanks.
Could I ask a quick question about the, you mentioned Haldane literacy profile, learning more from NWEA results. Is
Yeah.
that something new, or is that using that in different ways?
It's the Haldane literacy profile itself is, my understanding, is not new, it's resurrected and revised. And so it was more about creating common expectations amongst grade levels about utilizing different literacy assessments other than just the NWA that would give us more specific insight into students' proficiencies and areas of growth when it talks about like literacy development. So DIBELS, for example, is something that is separate than the NWA. The NWA is our universal screener. We give K-12, but obviously in the primary grades, that gives us some information, but not necessarily enough information that we might be looking for. So either we're using NWA as saying, here's a subset of students who need to do this, but what we found this year is that those assessments are given to everybody as a way of gathering information and then getting a better picture of a student's literacy profile to then have conversations around what instructional changes or shifts we need to make for either groups of students that are performing in a similar way or individual students.
So this is something that they've been doing, or it's something new for?
I'd say over the last year and a half, it's been in development in the elementary school. There's a group of elementary teachers, it's called the Haldane Literacy Profile Committee, that have been working to kind of coalesce and put these together alongside with Megan Hargrave at times, and Christine Jamin has been obviously facilitating this work as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
Just real quick, just to follow up. So you're telling me that from the NWEA, those assessments, you're getting decent enough feedback from those to create a literacy profile for specific children that you can then use intervention services for?
Yes, in spirit, that's exactly the design of it, is that, you have an NWA score, you have these other scores that you're gathering, and then you're getting a more specific picture of a student's literacy profile, I keep using the word, and then from those conversations at grade level or individual, it's talking about what interventions that we either need for individual students or for groups of students.
And we've been able to implement interventions this year from that?
Yes, we're working.
Okay.
So this is the first year, my understanding, that last year a lot of the work went into selecting what those were and
Right,
training
gotcha.
teachers, retraining teachers on the assessments themselves. This year in the fall was the administration of those assessments and then gathering those scores and then either in grade level meetings looking at those assessments. So for example, when Megan Hargrave was just here last week, when she met with every single grade level, they were looking at their NWA scores as well as the performance in these literacy profiles and starting to think about how we design instruction based upon these things. So it hasn't, my understanding, been like ongoing. It's something that we've created, we started to assess, and we're going through this process now of thinking about what those, what that looks like in practice.
All right, thanks, Jeff.
Yep. Yep. Just grab that from you.
As the board's familiar, this is also the time of the year where we begin to also look at our staffing projections for next school year. There's no recommendations that we're making this evening, but just to acknowledge that this is going on in the background. Basis for that is examining class size. For this evening, I just wanted to share a general overview on class sizes at the elementary and middle school level. So at the elementary school, our class sizes range anywhere between 12 and 20 students, depending on the grade level. At the middle school, in our core classes, between 12 and 18. And at the high school, between 15 and 19, again, in most core classes. Obviously, as we work our way up into the secondary program, we have electives, we have other course offerings that the range is pretty disparate. But I focused here, just for this information, on core classes, math, science, ELA, social studies, obviously our general education classrooms at the elementary level. We did develop parameters last school year alongside a group of our elementary teachers to try to arrive at an understanding of what appropriate class size ranges were at the K2 and the 3-5. We're using those ranges as a guide to examine our staffing projections for next school year. And I'll have more to share on that with the board at our next meeting as part of the administration's recommendation. Again, we're following a similar format here of our spending and what we've budgeted and projected in a few areas as it relates to curriculum and instruction. So I'll just present these slides and pause on each for your review. And if there's any questions that Josh or I can answer. We're trying to just gradually increase our funding as it relates to curriculum development and writing. So you see what was budgeted for this school year. Similarly with staff development, outside conferences and workshops, and discussion with Josh and our curriculum leaders, we want, and this is a continued thread into next school year, I just, not to get too far ahead of it, but it'll be included in the recommendation. We want our staff to feel that they have the ability to attend outside conferences and workshops, not just on a regional level, but at times even on a national level. We feel it's important, particularly for our staff that's in leadership positions, to have the ability to do that, to get out of Haldane once in a while, to go seek and learn from colleagues across, again, the region or the nation, and to bring what they're learning back to Haldane. So that's a line that we've targeted for additional funding for next school year as well. Literacy and intervention training, Josh has alluded to that. That's our continued work with Megan Hargrave, as well as the Reading League. Josh also mentioned the micro-credential that's provided through SUNY, which our teachers are actively engaged in right now, in particular those at the elementary level. I think on my last check, we have 18 general education teachers at the elementary school. 12 had already signed up and are participating in the SUNY micro-credential. And that's beyond what we're already doing here at Haldane. So really the staff has demonstrated a significant commitment to extend their learning as it relates to the teaching of literacy in our elementary school.
So,
Yep.
just real quick. So, I look at the 2019 numbers more importantly, right? Because
Yep,
the
sure.
idea is, COVID, so everything kind of drops down there.
Yeah, right.
So, to me, it seems like you're moving funds from BOCES from the 2019 to the outside conference. You find basically that's the.
I
not
wouldn't
the
say
point,
we're
but-
necessarily moving from one to the other. BOCES we tend to approach just based on what offerings they have and how do they align with what our goals or initiatives may be for that year. So I wouldn't say it's as direct as we're moving money out of BOCES and we're moving it over here, because you'll see as in total our spending has increased in this area over the years. So it's not just coming from BOCES, we're also supplementing by new money coming into areas related to curriculum development and professional development.
It's great. It's just, I'm just trying to see if there's anything in there where you say, we're valuing this because we have an opportunity, like you said, to get guys, some more of a, maybe a nuanced perspective outside of the valley or something.
Absolutely. And one thing I would point to, just going back to 1920, and some shifts that we've made. I know back around that time, it's a little bit of a blur, we were reaching out for BOCES for dedicated support in the area of curriculum supervision and development. We had Judy Barbera, so some of the board members who were here. So part of that may be a reflection of the individual who we had contracted to work directly with us throughout the year. And obviously, I had a recommendation to the board, and the board supported designating a position, an administrative position for curricular and human resource oversight, Josh. And we're really happy that Josh is here. So that's reflected now elsewhere in the budget. That being said, literacy and intervention training is something that you can see we at one point were not making a dedicated investment in, but we obviously have over the last 2 years and will continue to.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And the COVID years, spending generally went down because we were limiting conferences, we were limiting a lot of things.
And is the fourth line down, the professional development, learning focused supervision, is that supporting building leaders so that they can, because that was actually one of the things I've had a note that I was wanting to
so that's part of our training
right,
as building leader, or funding that's set aside to ensure that there's a consistency and I would say a shared understanding of when we're supervising our teachers, what do we want to see, what are the best practices we're looking for in our classrooms.
Right. So, great. Thank you.
Now, the bulk of our money, our funding, goes towards where it should, I would say, which is the salaries and the benefits associated with our teaching staff. So this has not changed significantly over the years. We're a human resource rich organization, as schools are. But I don't recall who, but someone had asked about, just to start with it, that last line there, the program component, or second to last line, program component as a percentage of total budget. And I alluded to this during the last presentation when I think we were presenting either admin or capital, that if you were to see where the shift occurs, it occurs here by a few percentage points over the years. And it's because we've increased our staffing. And I'll provide a more comprehensive summary of that as part of the admin recommendation, just a bit of a look back to the positions that we've added over the years. But we've added a few teaching positions and we've added a few special education positions as well over the years. We're not really able to do a lot in any one year in terms of adds, but we have made deliberate additions over the last 5 years, specifically when it comes to teaching positions in the district. And that's why you see, as a reflection of the overall budget, a greater percentage here than, it's not a large amount, but compared to the other areas. Any questions there? No. So just some final thoughts. A lot comes together quickly. At our next meeting, you'll not simultaneously, but Regina will be presenting the budget for special education. She'll also be providing an update on some of the work we've done as it relates to the special education audit, how we're utilizing that work as a basis for our planning for next school year, and that'll be reflected in the budget presentation that Regina provides. And then I'll follow that and provide the administration's initial recommendation for the budget for the 24-25 school year. One thing that I want to just speak to, I didn't draw this out, but as it relates back to state aid, I think, more of an art than a science. We've positioned this that the administration's recommendation, again, will be a reflection of what we feel we're able to do based on the information that we have at this point in time. If we're in a position where we'd receive additional funding from the state, obviously that may give us reason to go back and see if there's anything further we can do and include in next year's budget. So that is that unique period that we're in from the end of February or early March to the time the board adopts the budget in mid-April or so as we prepare to present it to the community for vote. I have not asked specifically, but I would ask you to consider, because we should talk about this at some point, whether it be tonight or our next meeting. Our levy limit is around 2.8%. So I know as we consider a building proposition to put before the community in the fall, at some point we had discussed about, well, do we want to maybe keep the levy lower? But not knowing what the levy is until now, it's hard to really have that kind of conversation. I would say at 2.8%, I think it seems to me, I'm going to develop a budget up to 2.8% and we can talk from there. But it's not as if the situation we had a few years ago where our levy limit was 3.9%, I recall, which I think if we were in this situation, I would say maybe we want to actually come in lower than that because we're going to go back out to the community in 6 months or so and ask them to support a building proposition. 2.8, I don't know if that's necessary. But I'd ask that you sit with that and consider that as we prepare for the next conversation, unless you want to talk further about it tonight. Those are my final thoughts.
Real
Yep,
quick,
please.
on your pupil transportation, that number went down on the budget. That could be any number of reasons, but in your estimation, our owning of our own buses, our control of our own drivers, that makes the most financial sense, meaning outsourcing that would be a negative hit to the
Right
school.
now it does. I would say at this moment in time, it's worked in our favor. And part of that is because we still are in a time where there's incredible variability in costs from month to month, year to year, and not being able to project how those costs may shift over time because of inflation or other measures. And I think that,
Placements or something like that.
yeah, and I think labor being, the difficulty that companies or school districts are having finding drivers further drives cost up. No pun intended, but further causes the cost to increase. So the districts I know that contract out for that service are really experiencing a lot of pressure because their costs as they go to renew their contract are increasing, 20, 30, 40%.
Right.
So we're able to contain that a bit because we own the buses and we're working with contracted employees. So it has, I want to say, it's benefited us. Costs are generally increasing, but it has helped mitigate some of the increases that we're seeing in
Shielded
other
us
areas.
a bit.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
That being said, as part of the electric bus study, I want to note that we would, and I think we should, examine what it would cost to lease buses in the future.
Yeah.
But that I don't think is necessarily a commitment to doing so. It's an exploration just to see what those costs would look like.
Right. And we still don't know any type of buybacks or support from a
Not
basic
yet.
unfunded mandate from the
Oh,
state.
no, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Leasing, we don't get BOCES relief, do we?
We don't.
Or state relief?
No, if you lease, you don't get transportation aid on your leases. So going back to earlier, one of our aid lines is the aid we receive on our transportation costs.
Yeah.
On electric vehicles, we will, if we buy them.
Okay.
But if we lease
Right,
them, we will not.
Right.
Taxes on energy, same, like we don't pay tax on energy, like we don't pay tax on gas.
No, I don't, no.
Right. It's the advantage of the municipality, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Going back to the foundational aid,
Yep.
the set aside for literacy, or Haldane will get some of that?
We don't know. So it's there, right? This
Okay.
is what happens. Yeah. And I think we spoke about this last year on another matter where,
The
like
tutoring?
what's that?
Oh, sorry.
Yes, the
tutoring.
high impact
Yeah.
tutoring. That's
Yeah,
exactly
high
right.
impact tutoring.
This has been a shift, and this started a couple administrations ago where you have a unique structure in New York, and I'll get off in that. You have a state education department that has no direct tie to the legislature, or to the executive office, and that was intentional in the state charter. And yet you have, let's just say, a governor who has specific agendas and that they want to see and carry forth in the schools. So it's become now a practice for, if a governor wants to see, and again, I'm trying to present this in a value neutral perspective, but if a governor wants to see a certain change in education in the state, they write it in the law. And what's the law? It's the budget. That budget is adopted as law, so this will be the laws of 2024, as that budget is adopted, and then tied to that will be various initiatives. And again, value neutral. Some of them are maybe perfectly fine and appropriate, but that's become now somewhat routine as a governor develops their executive proposal to underwrite into that various programs that they would like to see carried forth in the school. Yet the unique piece is the state education department is the regulatory body that has to oversee them. So these things can happen completely separate from one another. So we're often in this position now where we say, we'll see what that means and how that funding's distributed. My sense is, Maggie, $10 million across New York State for professional development teachers is not a lot of money. So I think you'll see programs like they're doing right now with SUNY. And I will say the governor has had a very collaborative approach with the state education department, which isn't always the case. The SUNY micro-credential, so probably we'll see things like that because you can operationalize that across the entire state. SUNY, campuses are everywhere, or broadly throughout the state, and it's a way for our teachers to access some professional development there. I wouldn't rely on it to shift the scope of programming in our school or shift the practice in our school. That'll happen from what we fund directly, and that's why we've made those efforts over the previous years. It's not going to happen through the state funding. Off the box for me. Good question, though.
Well, it'd be boring if we didn't ask any questions.
There you go.
Terrible.
Thanks. Okay, we're going to transition now to tax exemptions. Keep plugging along, and I'll set this up, and Catherine's actually going to share some information, and it's been very difficult for us. I think Catherine and I and our administration feels a responsibility, certainly when we're talking about taxes, to provide a level of detail to the Board of Education that you can understand acutely what the tax impact is that we're discussing. As it relates to at least one of the exemptions that we're considering tonight, quite frankly, the answer is we don't know. And Catherine will provide a little bit of information on that. On another, I think we can figure it out. But it's been difficult as new exemptions or as groups are eligible for new exemptions to work through with the assessor's office and also just having an understanding of, well, if we're going to adopt this exemption, what will the impact be on a taxpayer if this other taxpayer is exempt at any sort of level. And we feel a responsibility to provide that level of information. You're not going to see it tonight. I just want to acknowledge that, but we'll certainly seek to provide as much information as we can that the board desires. And both of these exemptions that Catherine's now going to discuss, you can come up now, are a tax shift. So meaning if one group is not paying a portion of this tax, it has to be accounted for by the other non-exempt taxpayers. Okay. With that, I'll turn it over to you. I'm going to sit behind.
Great. I've never used this before. There we go. Okay, we're going to talk about two potential tax exemptions tonight. The first one is one that would be for our volunteer firefighters and ambulance workers, a tax exemption specifically for that group. And the other one we'll talk about is a adjustment to our current senior citizen tax exemption. So for volunteer firefighters and ambulance workers, local governments and school districts can opt to grant a reduction on the amount of property taxes paid by volunteer firefighters and ambulance workers. We are able to grant a property tax exemption of up to 10% of the assessed value of the property, as long as the property is used exclusively for residential purposes. We can set a minimum service requirement to be eligible for this from anywhere from 2 to 5 years.
We have an option of granting a lifetime exemption for people who have given 20 years of service. And this will, if we do this, it does require a resolution by the Board of Education. This exemption is not reimbursed by the state like our STAR funds, so it does result in a tax shift from one group of tax holders to another. The thing to remember for tax exemptions is when we set our levy, we get that amount regardless, so that's the amount that we are given. It's just who pays which portion of it. And then just so that you are aware, this exemption currently is being given by the town of Phillipstown. It's also being given by Garrison School District.
And, I'm sorry,
No, go ahead.
just a quick question. Third bullet point, minimum service requirement from 2 to 5 years with an option of lifetime exemption. So this is for, does that imply it's for people who are currently serving? And there's an option for people to grant it into perpetuity for anyone who has over 20 years?
Over 20
Okay,
years.
fine. So you need to be a current volunteer firefighter or ambulance worker? Okay.
Yes, and
cool.
the eligibility, which we'll talk about now, is you have to reside in the town or village that's served by their volunteer services. So for the town of Phillipstown, you have to be a active member of the ambulance corps or the fire companies that are part of Phillipstown. You can't be somewhere else and then have it in that locale.
Garrison, Highlands, Cold Spring, PVAC, basically?
Yeah.
Okay.
And again,
be Garrison.
it wouldn't be Garrison for
It would be
us.
Garrison.
It would
It's
be
not
Garrison.
You said Phillipstown, but I think you mean do you mean the municipalities that are within the Haldane School District?
Okay, yeah.
So that would be North Highlands,
Cold Spring.
Cold Spring.
Cold Spring,
And then
Phillipstown
the
Ambulance
Phillipstown
Corps.
Ambulance Corps.
Peter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, it is only valid on their residence. If you have a business or a property that's partial residence and partial commercial, it would be prorated for the residential part of the building. Again, the benefit is you can exempt up to 10% of the taxable assessed value. And again, the lifetime exemption would be 20 years who maintain their primary residence within the same school district. So you do have, some ways to not, but to limit who receives it, but it is 20 years with a primary residence in the school district. And if a eligible volunteer passes away, the benefits can be extended to their spouse as long as the spouse stays unremarried. I don't make the rules. So that's just the background for volunteer. So if you have any.
Yeah, I do have a question.
Okay, sure.
All right. My question. Can you go back to
Which one?
eligibility? Okay. Service can you establish a minimum service requirement at any point you want?
You can, as the
Okay.
board, you can decide, I want to do it for 2 years of service, 3 years of service,
Okay.
5 years of service.
So
Yeah.
you could.
And you can do up to 10%. So,
Okay.
just,
Yeah.
I
got it.
did I looked around at what other people are doing, and I have it here.
So you could do, yes, I would love to hear that, but you could just do a lifetime exemption for anybody over 20 years.
Correct.
Or you could sort of slice it however you want. Okay.
So what are those numbers?
The town, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The town is doing 2 years as a minimum service requirement. They are giving the full 10%, and they did do the lifetime exemption. Garrison did the same, as did the Brewster School District. Carmel and Putnam Valley have not enacted this yet, and Mayapack did the 2 years, but they did 3%, and they did 3% as a lifetime exemption after 20 years. So that you have some flexibility as to which pieces you want to enact.
And have we figured out how many
Microphone.
firefighters, how many ambulance corps workers there
I do
are
not have that
do-
information in front of me right now, but I can certainly get that for you. Okay. So that's just the background on volunteer firefighters and ambulance workers. I just wanted to give you some background now on the senior citizen exemption. So this again is a reduction to assessed value, and it's eligible for senior citizens based on their income. We do have this. We put it in 2007, and we phased it in from 2007 to 2009, and it's remained unchanged since then. The income limit was if you made $29,000 or less, you received 50% off your assessed value, and it went out with a sliding scale that it ended at $37,500, and that at that point you received 5% off your assessed value. Again, it's not reimbursed by the state, so it results in a tax shift from the senior citizens to non-senior citizens in the district. And then just to note, this exemption has not been acted on by the town of Phillipstown. And I did speak with the town of Phillipstown, and they currently are not considering this exemption.
But this is an exemption we currently provide.
We currently provide it at that income limit. The decision we have to make is we are able to increase the income limitations. And that is what other municipalities and school districts have been doing.
Is there any reason that we haven't increased the limit since 2007?
We're only eligible to, it became an option as of last year to give a new sliding scale.
Can you change it like related to CPI or something like that? Just put in an annual revision of the.
I don't think so, but
So
I
this
can
is
look
like a
into, this is
one-time-
like real property
brand
tax
new.
law. Mhm.
Okay.
And they just gave a fixed number.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay, so the eligibility here again is it is exclusively for residential purposes, owned for one or more persons, each of whom is 65 or older, or owned by married spouses or by siblings, one of whom is 65 years or older. So that I said to Dr. Benante this morning, the convoluted wording of all these exemptions. But again, it's like we don't have to monitor who's eligible, they have to apply. And they'd have to submit documentation. And again, it's a benefit exemption of taxation from 5% up to 50% of the taxable assessed value, and it's determined by a sliding scale. We are not able to quantify what that tax shift would be because it's based on income eligibility, and nobody has any access to, the county doesn't have the access to analyze that. So what people have been doing, school districts and municipalities have been expanding the thresholds over a 3-year period, which is what we did back when we enacted it in 2007. And that helps to mitigate the uncertainty, because if we did one shift for next year, we would see what the change was. And then you could decide if you wanted to go forward with the next one, if you did it on a 1-year basis, or you could just know we could set it up for a 3-year basis and know what the impact is, but have already determined that we want to increase it over 3 years. And again, some municipalities and school districts did just a 1-year period to see how the impact was. Other ones said, we're all in and we're gonna do an increase for 1 year, an additional increase for the 2nd year, and then going to the maximum for the 3rd year.
Catherine, what was your experience in 2000? I mean, what was the district's experience in 2007?
I would have to go back and look. I'm sure there's a file of it somewhere. I mean, obviously I was not here,
exactly.
so.
Like, it was like, oh, that was a no-brainer, or like, wow, we didn't expect, that hit. That would be at least helpful, right?
Sure. Okay.
It's interesting because I don't remember it being in the news. It could have been in those years, but I don't remember. I wasn't going to board meetings, but I was certainly following the extent to which the PCNR reported at that point really regularly on the school board. So,
I can look back.
It'd be interesting.
I'm sure in that office somewhere, there's probably a file with all the details. So I wrote out a potential plan for this exemption. If we want to just accept the challenge that's presented by this uncertainty, we can jump right in. We could phase into the different levels over a 3-year period. So beginning effective March 1st of 2024, so it would be enacted for this upcoming September school tax season. We could increase the income limit to 40,000. So anyone under 40,000 would get that 50% discount or percent off their assessed value, and it would phase out at 48.4, I guess is probably easier than doing the pennies. But and then we could again increase it by $5,000 additional dollars for 2025, hitting the maximum in 2026 of anyone under $50,000 would get the 50% off the assessed value. So that's just that is the standard that seems to be happening out there, unless people adopt just the one with a wait and see. How much did it shift? And then re-present it next year. Like Mayapack, for instance, did a 1 year. And now they're looking at it again to decide what they thought, was the impact too great for your non-seniors to take on.
So, wait a minute. I know this is going to sound like a really stupid question.
There are no stupid questions with tax exemptions.
I didn't ask it yet.
You're in a script.
I didn't ask it yet. I am great at this. So if you did a 1 year thing and you said you then looked at it, right? And so then you're going to say, well, that was too much of a hit to the guys not paying, to the guys who aren't seniors. And then you go to the seniors that you just gave an exemption to and say, sorry, we're going to.
I don't think we can take it back. I think we wouldn't go to the next level.
Okay. Thanks. See, it was kind of it was a middle.
It was a good
dumb
question.
It was not the best. Thanks, buddy.
So, the decisions that need to be made for the volunteer firefighters and volunteer ambulance workers, the first question is, would the board like to adopt this exemption? If you do want to adopt the exemption, we need to discuss what is your minimum service requirement that you'd like to put in. What percent of the assessed value would you like to use? And do we want to do the lifetime exemption? And I guess an added question would be, do we want to just do it for 1 year and then relook at it in this time next year? For senior citizens, first question is, do we want to adopt it, or do we want to postpone this adoption until the town of Phillipstown adopts this exemption? It will be, I believe it could lead to some confusion when their town of Phillipstown tax bills and their school tax bills have different exemptions associated with them, but it also, other school districts have done it. So do we want to revise the income scale, and do we want to do it on a phase-in schedule or a 1 year? So these are just some of the decisions that need to be discussed. Before we discuss them, just so you know what would happen, if we do decide to proceed with these, a public hearing would be required. We'd have to hold it at the February 27th, 2024 Board of Ed meeting if we wanted these exemptions to go in as of March 1st. After that public hearing, a resolution would need to be passed for each type of exemption, and we'd have to spell out in it which of the options that we're taking. Again, if we adopt it prior to March 1st, the exemptions would take effect in the 24-25 school year, so our 2024 school tax assessment, and the resolutions could occur at the same meeting of which the public hearing takes place. So we could do all of this at the February 27th Board of Ed meeting.
It needs to go in.
But that's the next meeting.
It is the
Needs
next
to
meeting.
happen by March.
I love it.
By March 1st for next year.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
I love it.
But, I mean, it depends how the board feels, but it's also acceptable for us to be like, that's not enough time. We'd rather wait and do it next year.
But this was the second year? Like, did we pass it off from last year or the fall?
We did.
So
We
we've
delayed it.
We've already delayed it again.
But the board never received,
Information.
the board never received this level of information. I mean, that makes, I see that. I do get that. Well, do people have any more questions? No.
I just have a question about your bullet point about, do we want to wait until the town of Phillipstown adopt? Did you not also say that the town of Phillipstown is not adopting the senior
They
citizen?
have not adopted it and currently have not adopted it yet, and currently they are not planning to. There is nothing on there.
So the unspoken then directive in that bullet point is, we're not going to do it until the town board does it. Once they do it, we will follow suit.
No, we
can.
can, yeah.
No, I'm just saying
yeah.
that one point that was made in that one slide.
it was
that's
more
what that
just,
suggests.
you know, do we want to
Gotcha.
do it concurrently?
Gotcha.
Just something I would mention is that we worked with us, 2 town trustees through the fall to examine these exemptions and just try to approach it. Collaboratively is the wrong term because the town has to do what the town does and what's right for the town while we do what we do, what's right for the school district. But with the spirit of sharing information and having a common understanding of what exemptions each group was going to pursue or maybe pursuing, to the spirit of what Catherine had shared, so that community members aren't confused if they're getting their tax bills from the town and the school. Well, why are there one set of exemptions on one and not on another potentially? So the town adopted the one exemption, I think, in December. They had to adopt by the end of December for it to take effect for their next school year. For us, it's by March.
So it's a lot. I mean, there's a part of me in terms of thinking about how to do this efficiently is to figure, well, to what extent is there really alignment in like moving forward with these? And I'm almost kind of tempted to do like a quick, like, I'm leaning towards this, I'm leaning towards that for each one of these. I mean, I have actually really pretty clear thoughts about what I have, what I think about this. And I guess because I'm wondering, if there's not really pretty clear alignment, I mean, we could certainly spend however long we wanted to as a board, talking about this and arriving at some sort of consensus. I'm just curious how much, the extent to which, there is consensus. And so I don't know. I mean, one way to do this would be to give folks just a chance to sort of weigh in and say, well, this is how I feel about the volunteer first responders, and this is how I feel about the senior citizens, and then just kind of go around and then talk about it from that perspective. Does that make sense?
Do you want to do that now, or you want to do that at a later date?
No, I think we need to do it now, because I think where we need to get to is it even feasible for us to get to a place where we would hold a public hearing at our very next meeting,
Gotcha.
which is what's, and I'm not sure if that's going to be an easy thing for us to arrive at or not. So, in that spirit, I'll go first. As really appreciative as I am of the volunteer firefighters and ambulance workers, I'm not sure in this moment, right, how I feel about having. I guess personally, that's a tax exemption that I feel less confident about. The one regarding the senior citizens, that's the one that I'm personally more in favor of. And that really has to do with the fact that the high taxes in our district are more burdensome for our low-income seniors. And under those circumstances, that's to me the tax exemption that I view as being the one that I feel more positively about. Not that I'm opposed to the other one, but the low-income seniors is the one that I personally think is more important for the well-being of the community.
So I'm good with both.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm fine. I think it's great. The way we levy, we have to get it anyway. That means that I guess my taxes would go up, but I'm cool with that. I mean, really, honestly, because what will happen is, we're talking about low-income seniors, right? So to me, that's a no-brainer. And then volunteer firefighters and ambulance guys, sure. And it's not like this isn't done around the state, right? And communities. So it's not like we're going out on a limb. The only question is, right? So from my viewpoint, add to cart. Let's do it. But the issue is, you're the money person, so you go back and you say, what's for you the best process is doing either the 1 year and reviewing or just do the 3-year phase-in, And to you, it matters or it doesn't matter?
No.
Yeah.
If we come back and look at it, I'll have
That's why I love
additional
that
information to give it to you.
07 perspective. I'm a history guy So like, what happened? What's it look like? And can we make a decision off of that? But, yeah, that's where I'm at.
I would think if the board were to pursue either that, in trying to be a bit deliberate about it, of doing so as a 1 year, giving us an opportunity to examine the tax shift that occurred, and then you would at least have that information as a basis of making the next decision if you were to choose to go further with it. The districts that have done it have been able to provide that level of information back to the Board of Education to then reconsider the topic the following year.
Yeah.
So, which would include how many people are eligible, at what percentage level you chose, so you can see what then the valuation shift is, and then what does that result in for a non-exempt property owner based on the value of their home. So we would be able to do that in a year if you considered really any of the exemptions.
Right.
But we
Oh,
can't
so
provide it to you right now.
I didn't follow that as clearly. So I really understood from Catherine's presentation the phasing in of the exemption for seniors. And from the conversation, what I understood was if you implemented, so for example, the example first phase that Catherine outlined, once we gave that would be precedence, we would
No backsies.
no backseas.
Right.
Yeah.
But I
But we
didn't
could
see
not
that.
move forward.
Well, we would not move forward. That I understand. With the volunteer firefighters and ambulance workers, to me, I didn't see like a phasing in process.
No.
It was like you would make a decision, but that would be that would be
You
the.
could you could at any year make a decision to increase the.
So you could
the
start by
contribution
saying
rate.
it's
You
gonna
could say
be this,
set it
it's
at
gonna
its
be
lowest
5
level.
okay.
5 years, right, would be a lower level
Okay.
because it's a higher
Right.
bar to reach, and then the income.
Okay, I feel better
It's
about
a
that.
maximum
Okay.
of 10%.
Yes.
So you could say
Right.
2%, and then decide a year from now, see what that tax impact is, and say,
Right.
okay, we're more comfortable now going down to a 2-year minimum service requirement and up to maybe a 5-year percentage. So you'll have the data at that point to develop a model off of, or we will,
Right.
to share with you.
And
So my position is if you're going to do it, I would just suggest or recommend you do so at a lower level. That would provide us an opportunity to collect information after a year and present it back to you. That way, any additional extension you wanted to make would be based on
Right.
an actual understanding of what the tax shift would be.
And Mayapack did that. Mayapack did 3%.
And you said-
For 1 year. And then now they're looking at the tax implications of what the tax shift was. I don't want to give out their numbers because their properties are different than ours. But they did not see such an impact that they don't feel comfortable going forward this year and raising it to 10%. That is what they're discussing now.
And that's the first responders piece,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And the other districts went straight. They
They
did
went
2
all
years,
in.
they went 2 years and 10%.
10%.
And haven't looked back, and they're good.
I have not seen analysis of that.
Okay.
That's how it's
good.
Yeah,
They're good.
I'm a fan of this, of bringing the levels for senior citizens up to date.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, let's do that. And I agree with the point, right? I think with cost of everything, allowing seniors to have some small reduction in the cost of living in Cold Spring, I think is a
Low-income seniors,
fantastic
yeah,
thing to
yeah.
do. And I think we've made the commitment to do this at one point. It seems like that it's probably gotten out of whack, and to be able to help the people who are living on the lowest income. Similarly to Peggy, I'm a little skeptical about paying for volunteerism. I think there are a lot of people in our communities who volunteer, including us, for lots of different things. I don't think that's why people participate in those organizations, and certainly not why people participate in any organization. They do it because they want to give back to the community, they have special services, they do X, Y, Z. I would, however, be interested in solely a longevity execution, for people who have committed for 20 years to be a volunteer fighter or ambulance corps. I think that's phenomenal. And that rewards a consistency, a longevity. It sort of doubles down on what these people are, their commitment to the community, and the fact that they're likely going to be seniors and want to continue to be in the community. I'm less in favor of rewarding ongoing volunteerism financially. It's volunteerism. Sorry.
I'm good with both. I think, you know, to the second part, to the firefighters and the volunteer ambulance corps, you know, I think it's not going to impact us in terms of our budget, right? We'll get our levy no matter what. But I think the bigger trend is it's a marketing tool for the firehouses and for the ambulance corps workers. Volunteerism is falling like statewide, and if we don't have the volunteer firefighters and ambulance corps workers, we would have to shift to some type of paid, and which means taxes go up, right? That said, I'm come from a household that would benefit from that, so I feel a little uncomfortable, probably at least voting for it if we go participating in the vote, I should say. Yeah, I would think so.
Well,
But I mean,
you have more morals than most of the Supreme Court. So, you know, to that point, right? You got to think why the exemption exists, right? Why it's built in, and I think it's 100% about, you know, many of these volunteer ambulance corps need volunteers, and it's a way that the state has built in at least a decent enough carrot to try to help. I mean, really, does that really supplant, right? The work that they do? That doesn't supplant it. We're not really paying for volunteerism. I got to disagree with you, John. I love you, brother, but you know, it's not really, you know, that amount of money is not the time, energy, and effort that they're putting into it. It's you know, it's at least an acknowledgement that we could provide, and the state has obviously created a formula, and other municipalities and schools have jumped on it. So,
I'm very much aligned with the point that you made about our volunteer firemen, and I mean, at the end of the day, we don't have to put in 600 hours of training before we can. I wish we did. We'd be much better and more efficient school board if we had to put in 600 hours of training before we got here. But when I just think about the degree, the level to which, you know, even to volunteer your time, you know, you're giving up your time in a meaningful way, and you know. You benefit because someone's in your home, and I benefit because if my house catches on fire, I will continue to have a home if we have volunteers. So, and as far as that's concerned, you should give yourself a break on that, because I don't think that's necessarily how you should feel about it. And as far as the senior, I agree with you, Ezra, and with what Dr. Benante said about, since we don't know what the impact is going to be, I think it's responsible for us to move forward, you know, with whatever we decide on that percentage might be next year to see, because then we'll get a better sense of, okay, now we can calculate basically what portion of our residents in one way or another actually make up that part. So we will we can scale what 10% would look like based on what 3% looks like, which I think is our duty to other members of the community who are homeowners, who are not senior citizens, but who do not have astronomical incomes, because there are people in our community who make $50,000 a year, who may own property here as well, who are not 65, who don't get that break. So I just think that's the responsible thing to do, since it is tethered to income in that way too. So, yeah.
So what I hear is, you know, if you sort of think about this in sort of like consensus building, is really wanting to move forward with both, but in a potentially phased-in way. So I think Catherine's and Dr. Benante's proposals, the one I remember more clearly for the senior citizens of what you had for that first year proposal, made sense. In terms of the volunteer firefighter and ambulance, again, sort of an initial phase of, and I guess I would look to you all at this point for a recommendation, but it sounds like possibly the 5-year, folks with 5 years in service and starting with a lower level of exemption to start with. And if you all need, at this point, do you all need more guidance or feedback from the board about this?
With what we heard this evening, we'll organize a recommendation that we'll review with the board leadership at our next agenda prep.
meeting. And so that we could,
if
we
you
would
feel
have the
comfortable with
public,
the way it's organized, then we'll have the public hearing on the 27th.
and does that work with everybody?
Unless there, upon review from tonight, there's, some other thoughts come to mind and you feel that we're not ready for that, but we'll obviously talk about that if that's the case.
Well, and it's also then a heads up. So just to give people a sense of the timing, because of the spring break, we will actually have our agenda meeting, not the Thursday preceding the board meeting, but actually a week and a half before the board meeting, right? So that actually really does give the board considerable time to, usually, right, we just have the weekend to look at the agenda, but that really gives folks, if people pay, I'll try to remember to send an email to let people know to look at that on the agenda before spring break starts. I don't know. Winter break, what did I say? Sorry, winter break.
Small detail.
Sorry, February break, I'll call it that. February break. But that gives the board actually considerable time so that if there are any concerns, people can be in touch with me and I can be in touch with Dr. Benante, or they be in touch with both of us. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, that works. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you,
Apologies
Catherine.
for the ongoing coughing. Okay, so now we're at the part of the agenda where it's the first opportunity for communication for the public. Thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you for Dr. Benante for putting that together. So the Haldane Board of Education desires and values input from the entire school community. This first public comment session is reserved for comments on any special presentations or active agenda items. For those who wish to address the board, please sign in and state your name for the record. Please keep your remarks to a minimum to 3 minutes or less. Disparaging remarks and discussion of district personnel are strongly discouraged. Although we do not engage in dialogue, please know that we're listening, and we ask that you would leave your contact information with our district clerk, Megan Shields, for prompt follow-up from myself or Dr. Benante. Okay. Next on the agenda, we have our information reports, our financial reports that we'll act on at the next business meeting. Is that right? That was G. Yes, and now we're at H. So the consent agenda minutes. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And a second?
You got it.
Oh, I did. Sorry, I didn't hear it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So committee minutes. For our review, we have on here the committee minutes for the Wellness Committee, as well as the Technology Committee. There's certainly lots going on in both of those committees, and we thank everybody for their work on those. Moving into consent agenda financial, may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Dr. Benante, is there anything you want to touch base or let us know about?
No.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Moving to consent. I start to get lost in here. That was J, K. Consent agenda personnel. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Anything you'd like to bring to our attention, Dr. Benante?
There's not.
Or no? All right. May I, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, unfinished business. Moving into the Board of Agendas mid-year self-evaluation.
Oh, this is me.
Maggie.
So typically in years past, we've sent our feedback about ourselves and how we're doing with our goals to the person, which is me. And it's been a little bit anonymous, right? I compile everybody's thoughts and then we sort of derive a discussion on that. I didn't receive everybody's. So I don't know if I should.
That's not unusual. I'll just
Thank
point
you.
that
That's
out.
because you were the person last
I
year.
decided to be the person this year who didn't send it to you.
I could
so
tell.
That's
And the text that I got today at the text that I got today, I didn't look at that. So no.
We appreciate. So this will be more of an open conversation.
Yeah,
then.
open
I think
conversation.
that's fun.
But I do
That's
thank the
fine.
person, and I don't know if we're still being anonymous, so I thank the person that responded last week, which was Sean.
I typically don't respond, so
Yes.
it worked out very well.
It was a forum, the worst of the worst with forums.
So anyway, yeah, if we can just go through our goals. I mean, it's all pretty.
Actually, and I have what I sent Maggie on my phone, so I'm going to open it up.
Yeah, I have yours too, Peggy. I compiled it. So I'll just read through the goals. You know, our first goal was collaborate with the superintendent to finalize the campus master plan draft, finalize the components of Project One, and determine if and when Project One should be presented to the community for vote, with special attention throughout to community engagement and education. And from the responses that I received, I mean, I think we were pretty effective in terms of facilitating where we need to be with that at the moment. We're rolling along with finalizing Project One and getting ready, hopefully, to present it to the community for a vote. You know, being mindful about community engagement as we move forward and trying to anticipate some of the more hot button issues that arise with it. You know, that's one thing that we should probably be thinking about. And can we anticipate any of those issues? Anything else that?
I would just say it's a reflection of the engagement of the community that we've pulled out the HVAC piece, having just sat in the first HVAC conversation call today. I think that sort of reflects well on the process and a number of members of the community who have come and participated and had a very clear point of view on that, and that's being reflected. So I think that's useful.
Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the goals where, I mean, it's interesting because they're board goals, but the board can only be our ability to be successful really depends on a very strong partnership and much of the leadership from Dr. Benante. So I think our ability to be as effective as we've been with this particular goal, I think we definitely have to share responsibility with the support that we've had with Dr. Benante on this. So I really appreciate that. But no, I do think that we really, it's interesting because I think there's often these questions about like communication with the board, and I feel like this was an example where we gave a variety of different opportunities for people to, you know, engage in communication with us, and that we listened and were very responsive to that, and so I feel good about that.
And it's hard because sometimes some real good zingers, real good thoughts come in like a third string of a Facebook post, right?
That's right.
And so if we could, you know, figure out how to get that from the community in a
That's right.
different setting. But I don't know if we can, but we'll keep trying, I suppose, so. Anything? All right, goal number 2, monitoring the work of the Pupil Personnel Services Department as it develops long-term plans for program improvements and engages in near-term actions. You know, and a lot of this just, you know, comes from listening to Dr. Cation and her thorough reports and the reports from the results from the audit. You know, we got to sit down and think about the presentation following the special education audit, you know, listening to the experts on how to make the program better and how to address immediate needs. So I guess we'll be hearing more about that as the budget, right, development process comes along.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that and I think that's been our plan actually from the very beginning of the year, knowing that we'd have 2 opportunities to hear from Dr. Cation about that. One, when she did her special education report earlier in the year, and then knowing that we would hear from her during the budget season, I think. And actually, I mean, again, in partnership with district leadership, when you think about what was in Dr. Benante's presentation tonight, right, really, I think the board supports this, and I know Dr. Benante is really planning on developing the budget for the 24-25 school year with the results from the audit and continued work on it and in mind. That feels good.
Agreed.
All right, goal 3, develop new processes and practices for building visitation with the goal of developing opportunities for observing educational programs and connecting with district staff. Check. It was good. It's enjoyable. It's enjoyable going to Mr. McConville's class and hearing about different tax brackets. what the impact is. That was great.
We should have them run the regression on, like, what's the impact?
Have the kids do it. Yeah, that'd be great.
You know, it's 5 minutes. It's 5 minutes. It's a snapshot of what's happening, but it's you know, it's definitely enough to get a sense of what our students are experiencing. You know, planning to revisit the visitation process and how we do it each year, right? Moving forward would be, I think would be smart if we want to make any tweaks or refinements. Anything else with that one?
I wonder if, in order to kind of year over year carry what it is we want to see, if there's a way for us to kind of collect notes on what we observed, and if there was any information or points of interaction or engagement that we wish we would have, so that then following year, they can just kind of be built in, because this was this year, our tour of the middle school was quite complete, and I feel like Dr. Seelka and Dr. Benante set up a really great opportunity for us to see a lot of things, but it just might be useful for us to say.
Like a reporting process.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of my thoughts, like, this was sort of our trial year doing that, and maybe at the end of the year, when we do our end-of-year self-evaluation, think about, like, is there, even if it's, no one needs to go to the trouble of writing a memo, but you could imagine that you'd build that, so it's an hour visit, and then possibly the board members spend another 20 minutes, like, you know, creating a document that they share with the board about, you know, things that they saw, and that would be, you know, that could be posted on, as part of our agenda, and then, you know, carried over or something like that. Yeah. I actually think it's a good move on our part, and I feel like it's off to a good start.
And now that we're talking about this, the facilities, walking around like we used to do, where we see the buildings in different parts, is that totally separate now? Now remind me, and I
think we need to. I think we're going to have to figure out how to do that. I think part of our thinking about it was that there would be so much focus on facilities with the campus master plan and the potential of phase one that would be taken care of. But that's probably something that we also want to consider as well. You know, and I think we've talked about that, like some plan to regularly, you could imagine, like, I've heard boards sometimes have like a workshop like before the meeting, like the board will come together and do more of like really like a talking collaboration, sorry about that, a talking collaboration session. And you can imagine like coming in 30 minutes early once a year where we sit down and review like the building survey report. Like it would almost be like I think of this potentially as a study session, you know, where we would hear from the facilities director and have something like that. But you're right, because it's supposed to be both. It's not just about staff, students, and instruction. It really is also very much intended to be keeping up to date on the state of the facilities.
I don't know about this year, but I would certainly think that 6 months from now, if we go through this process and we do in fact move forward with Project One, there will be considerable oversight opportunities for ongoing projects as much as there is the current state of facilities that needed, you know. Yeah.
But we definitely want to, I'm thinking about, when we've talked with Dr. Benante about his evaluation and sort of thinking about different pieces, like what's something that sort of we're developing, what's something that we're sort of creating as a process, and when does something become like really a sustainable practice? And I think figuring out a way for that, like the board staying on top of where the state of the facilities and the state of where we are with all the needs that are reported on the building survey. I mean, it's a lot, you know, and very important. So anyway, things for us to think about. That's it.
And the last goal.
But this one falls on me, so it's actually a goal that I need to do.
Create and adopt a new board member orientation manual and related processes to facilitate information transfer, promote consistency, and maintain a highly effective body. but you shouldn't have to do it all, all of it. So I
No,
think
it's one of
you know.
those situations where I feel like I actually have to sort of, maybe that's again, I need to find time. And maybe actually, this is how I work really well, is like, I should say, like, there's going to be a couple of board meetings, and I'm going to come in 2 hours early.
Set a deadline for you? And
I need a deadline,
work
that's for
towards the
sure.
deadline?
But now I've collected different pieces of it. I've collected different, so what we're talking about for people that are listening is the board wants to develop a new member handbook, like an onboarding handbook. I mean, it's basically like your roles and responsibilities, but Maggie and I had a conversation about it last year, but like there's a lot of terms that are new and unfamiliar to a new board member, as well as, practices and
Yes.
How this board has historically functioned and how the current board wants to continue to function in terms of seeking consensus, presenting a unified voice, et cetera. So, actually, I need to stop and think.
But I don't think it has to be a full handbook. I mean, I think more of a like a table of contents of processes, right? I think about, because we do the training that we have to do from WISPA,
Right.
NISPA. And then when I sat down with Catherine and Anne, and I got my, BOE Finance 101, that was like things like that. That would be.
Right.
I agree with that. It's like there's collections of stuff out there that are resources that just assembling those in a right place, like school finance, school law, all the sort of, but then there is the sort of norms of Haldane,
I
like
think
how does
that-
Haldane
think
work,
that's-
right? And all that, and historical knowledge, like the conversation that we were having today about the last time they did this survey about HVAC and the EPC audit, and when the solar panels went, like all of that established knowledge. You don't have to capture everything, but there's something about how the board works that is unique and identifiable to us that should be captured. And it's not just you sort of learn by doing.
Right.
So,
Actually, at our next agenda meeting, I'm going to sit down and think about I'm gone a lot for the next month, but after that, sort of finding some times to sit down and put that together. Because we are, it is always possible that there will be new board members at some point, so.
In fact, it's inevitable.
In fact, it is inevitable.
oh, I certainly hope so.
It is inevitable, yeah. Yeah.
Good. I think we're good.
Thank you so much, Maggie.
Yes, thank you, Peggy.
Is there anything anybody else wants to say? All right.
Thank you.
Oh, so it's me. So now we're moving to new business. So we have the CSE, CPSE recommendations. May we have the recommended action, please?
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the recommendations of the Committees on Special Education and Preschool Special Education as presented.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. So moving on to the second item under new business, which is the policy review. This is the first reading and adoption of Policy 6190, Workplace Violence Prevention. May we have the recommended action, please?
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby waives the second reading and adopts the following Haldane Central School District policy as attached 6190.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Anything anybody wants to say about this policy? Pretty straightforward, mandated, got to get the training in place. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, so this is the second opportunity for communication from the public. This is related to all school district matters. All right. And does anyone on the board have any reflections that they want to share this evening before we close?
Yeah, super quick. Had the opportunity to go to the Putnam County, the all-county musicians, Maggie's
there
kids,
too.
yeah, was there too. I'll I'm always impressed, and I say this to a lot of people, Haldane punches well above its weight. It does that in its staff. I just count. I also just count kids at the all county, and man, there's a lot of Haldane kids there. And we're one of the small schools. So, it's a testament to Mr. Sauer and Ms. Stein, who not only do an incredible job with our students, but then with that festival also do quite a bit of work. So, that level of professionalism is phenomenal. And, it's just the same thing. It comes back over and over and over again. We do, our students and our staff, our faculty, we're always out of our weight class, and we do well. It's impressive. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
I wanted to echo what Dr. Benante said about Willy Wonka, particularly because that fifth grade class is near and dear to my heart because my son is in the fifth grade class, though he was nowhere near that production. But we had lots of kids over that weekend because it was his birthday, and there was lots of Oompa Loompaing going on, which was very nice. I let them listen to the song, and they wanted to hear it over and over and over again, thanks to Alexa and Amazon Music. But again, I just, to say that it was extraordinary to be there and to have that whole gymatorium full of parents and supporters for those kids. We're a small school, but we're mighty, and it was beautiful to see, those kids, fifth grade kids take stage and become the next middle school students who are going to go on to do great things. So it was very emotional for me personally for that reason.
That's nice.
It really was.
Yeah, it's great.
I would just say, yeah, I got to go see Willy Wonka. There's been a lot of stuff going on. It was fantastic. I've also been to a lot of very well-attended basketball games. I would encourage, there are a lot of events that a lot of people go to. There are a number more events that not very many people go to because it's like the parents and they're watching their modified kid play basketball or pick it. I would encourage people to go to things that your kids aren't in, because they benefit from having people there and cheering them on. I think that's great.
JV girls basketball.
JV girls basketball. I've been to a couple of those games. They're great, and they need the sport.
I did go to a modified boys soccer game one time, and my friends go, "Ez, why are you here?"
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So anyway.
Thanks, John. All right, Dr. Benante.
Just, John alluded to the HVAC work group meeting. So we did have our first meeting this evening, beginning to set up the parameters for that work and examining what our options are for heating and cooling in this building, as well as the high school, and a good group of community members who are supporting us with that. And we're going to learn a lot along the way, I believe. But thank you, John, for attending. It's great.
A huge thanks to
Yeah.
everyone involved in that. All right, so I move to adjourn the meeting. May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. All right, thank you very much.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.